Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is a bit unusual, and I've been holding off on the tests, on showing the test just a little bit, because I wasn't too sure about the accuracy of my results. The ink is Noodler's Nightshade, which, as you can see, I got at Goulet Pens, and under the, on the Goulet website, this is under a purple. And as you can see, there's a lot of purple here in the chromatography, but it's brown. And I have seen from the swabs and all that stuff that it is supposed to be sort of like a purple bordering on a brown, but this was really mostly brown, and even since I've completed the tests, as more time has passed, the tests have actually gotten more brown. But yeah, I decided I should probably show you my results anyway, so here you go. That's the ink. The tests were done in this Nemosine Singularity with a 0.8 stub, not that my camera is going to let you see that, and this Vanishing Point with a Broad Nib. Now, here's the proper chromatography, which is interesting all by itself. I put a drop of ink, dunked it in the water, and as you can see there's this like faint, like sort of light, almost pastel purple, and then there's this dark pink-ish thing, and then it goes into all sorts of colors. I mean, you can see like almost an orange right at the edge where it starts to go into green, and it's got this bright yellow at the corners, and then right up at the top there's this like slate blue. And then lately I've been letting it dry just to see how that'll affect the chromatography, and there's really not much of a difference. It looks like there's slightly, more, there's a little bit more down here, but everything else really seems to stay the same. So, now let's check out the paper test. Top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, I hope you'll be able to see this. It's brown. So, there, maybe that'll help. Yeah, it's brown. It's not really purple. And in fact, it's not that close to purple. I mean, when I first started writing with it, there were bare hints of purple, but now there's really not much. It's really just brown. Anyways, the 0.8 stub took 14 seconds. The Broad Vanishing Point took 16. And, yeah, there's no bleed, no feather, no spread. There's some nice shading, as you can see. There's no sheen. Not the best water test. I mean, it dyed the page, and there's still some left, but most of it is really gone, except for the dots. The dots really survived. Yeah. Next is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, where again, it's still really brown, but at the same time, you do see this nice shading going on. The 0.8 stub took 9 seconds. The Broad Vanishing Point took 13. Again, no bleed, feather, or spread. Still more brown than purple, though. Again, water test is not fantastic. It's mostly washed away here. Even the dots washed away a good bit. Dyed the page. It's really patchy what remains, and what remains is a bit explodey and feathery. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where the medium stub, or the 0.8 stub, took 19 seconds to dry, which was a pretty big leap. And the Broad Vanishing Point took 22, which did seem like a bit of a leap compared to the others. But, yeah, so as you can see, there's a good degree of shading. It can be very rich and very dark, but it almost starts to look thin in spots, but, I mean, really not. Like, it's sort of like if you're really picky about that, but, yeah. Of course, no bleeding, feathering, or spread, because this is Tomoe River. There was no sheen, but I did want to point out that the echo can be somewhat significant, just because this is a fairly dark ink, and this is some seriously thin paper. yeah, the dots took forever to dry. Like you might be able to see there's some smudging because, yeah, picking it up and then that was me, but still. Water test could have been a lot worse. It did dye the page a little bit. It did, it left behind this like pink thing, but it's mostly gone. Now for the next 3 tests, I just used the 0.8 Nemosine because it's a bit drier and it's a bit finer. So here on the 20-pound copier paper, it took 4 seconds to dry, and as you can see, there's a little bit of bleed throughout, and that's my familiarity with that pen makes it so that that's more bleed than I would like from such a moderate and fairly medium nib. There are some patchy feathers throughout, just sort of little bits where there's no pattern to it. So, yeah, really no shading remains. This is probably the most decent water test we've seen so far, but it's still really not good. Again, the dots seem to remain a little bit better. What's there is darker than we've seen, but it's still fairly light. It did dye the page, and it is a little bit patchy, so. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where again I used the 0.8 stub. 4 seconds to dry. You do retain a little bit of shading, you know, if you really look for it. Yeah, no bleed through. Like you can see the echo significantly, but there's no bleed through except right here at the edges, which you can see there's the margin. So this is the edge of the sheet of paper, which means it's a pressing issue, as in how the paper was pressed. But anyways, yeah, no, there's really no feathering. There's no bleed. There's essentially no spread, and where there is spread, again, it's sort of in the same areas where there was the pressing process issues. This paper is so awful that, like, I think you might be able to see how the paper began to, like, actually warp and wrinkle into itself when I added the water. But still, that's not, sadly, that's not the worst paper test we've seen so far. I mean, it is fairly dark, but it did explode a little. It is kind of patchy. It did dye the page. And lastly is Moleskine notebook paper, but tragically, this is yet another new Moleskine notebook paper that is not any more accurate than the last few because it's behaving well. And I'd say 8 or even 9 times out of 10, that is not how Moleskine will behave. 7 seconds to dry, which is a bit longer than I would have expected. You do retain some shading here. Again, take all these results with a grain of salt. No bleed, feathering, or spread. Water test, mostly gone. What remains is pink, kind of like we saw in the chromatography, but it's a bit patchy. It did dye the page. Not ideal, so. There you go. There's Noodler's Nightshade. At first I wanted to test it because I was like, is it brown or is it purple? Well, for me, it's a brown. It really is a brown. It's a brown with some hidden purple in the chromatography, especially since given time, and this wasn't a great deal of time, this was maybe a week or 2, it's just turned straight up brown. So, but it's a perfectly good brown. So for your consideration from the Triple N Network, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching. Bye.